It was great this year to, do something a little different at the beginning, right? We're going to slowly dive into the weeds and the nitty gritty with Industrial Defender. But, as we kind of go down that path, right, we wanted to continue to bring experts. We're not World Series Hall of Famers that are up here today, but, at least in our industry and our field, we feel like we are. So today I'm going to host a panel for you all. It's called Security Experts Perspective, Navigating Change in OT Security. Navigating change, I think we can all attest to this, that there's been significant change, whether it's in our personal lives or our professional lives. We're seeing a lot of different change. But the key thing here, and what I'm really excited about this panel, is you're going to get three different perspectives, right? Three different lenses. I'm going to let the gentlemen introduce themselves in just a minute. But James, Frank, and Brian bring a wealth of knowledge from those different perspectives, whether it's on the floor, right? Many of you have been working with them, policy on the Hill, E-ISACs, right? The information sharing associations, right? Different cohorts that they've been a part of as well. So before I go into it, look, this is an open panel. Please don't let us just talk to you the whole time. I am going to pull questions out and try to get you guys to engage as much as humanly possible here. But overall, right, we're going to talk about a number of different categories. We've got about 45 minutes. We're going to spend about 35 minutes going through the panel. I've got a list of questions that we have not enough time to get through. But please jump in, raise your hand. These three gentlemen are here for you all, right? So if you have questions, whether it is on the Hill, from an operator perspective, from the E-ISAC perspective, I encourage you all to kind of jump in and ask some questions. But with that, do we want to start with introductions? James, why don't you kind of kick it off and give some background and run through it?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is James Brosnan. I am a managing consultant at NERC. I have about 20 years of experience in the industry about all sorts of things. I was a field technician for a long time, but what's really near and dear to my heart is compliance and auditing. I ran an IT compliance team for a while. I ran a risk management team for a while, and I was a CIP auditor, which was super fun, super interesting. Now I'm in consulting and I love it.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Scott. I'm a strategic advisor at Imperium Global Advisors, which is an advocacy firm in Washington. My background is I spent 28 years in the Navy flying from aircraft carriers, then joined DHS as a civilian, worked in critical infrastructure for 16 years, 12 years at DHS, and then moved over to the White House for 6 years under Trump 45, Biden 46, Trump 47, both in the working critical infrastructure cybersecurity issues and policy issues. Very, very specific dealing with ICS. I worked on the ICS cybersecurity initiatives under the Biden administration and all the way through. So extensive background there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frank Honkus. I am the Director of Intelligence at the E-ISAC, or Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center. My background is OT cybersecurity focused. Worked at the Cybercom J5 and the J2, focusing on cyber threat to OT. This is over a decade ago, when a lot of this was nascent. So I was really there at the beginning watching cyber actors, nation state cyber actors specifically, begin to target, explore, and look for control system environments to hold at risk. Later in life, I went to the Department of Energy, worked in the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, working with the CRIS Data Cybersecurity Risk Information Sharing Program, basically looking for, again, nation-state cyber actors, anomalies, things of that nature. And then finally found myself at E-ISAC. I was the CRIS program manager for several years, I think 4 or 5 years, and now I'm the Director of Intel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Yep. So as I mentioned, right, different perspectives, right, different lenses. So as you all have questions, please ask, and we can direct those questions towards the person that's most applicable. So, keeping with the baseball theme, let's throw a softball up real quick, right? So the topic of the conversation is change in OT security. James, maybe starting with you, what's the, and I'll go through all three of you, right? What's the single biggest change in OT security that you've seen in the last, 12 to 24 months?
That's a great question. Probably the biggest change that we're seeing, especially for NERC CIP, right, is everything is moving towards risk management. And risk management is kind of that choose your own adventure style. right? It's less about checklist compliance, less about these are the things that you have to do, and more about, will you tell us what's important to you and how are you going to protect it?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think it's risk-informed, performance-based, outcome-focused actions versus more just checklist compliance. That has been a big thing. Before I go on, let me just take 1 second and thank you all. I want to thank not only Industrial Defender, but I want to thank everybody that's here. And the reason why I say that is, as I mentioned, I was 6 years at the White House working on policy of some of this. You all are the people that are actually doing it. You're here making this happen. And I know you're here for your companies and for your, for your organizations. But as a citizen who is not an energy person or a water person, I sit here, and the importance to national security and homeland security, which was my focus for many years, you all are the people that are actually doing it. And I know, I just hope that you understand how much people like me appreciate the work that you are doing and the passion and the efforts that you're making to do this, because more than just, important to your company, it is important to this country. It's important to this nation. And if you don't realize how much, those of us who are doing it appreciate it, I just want to say thank you right up front. So.
All right. So to take it back to the question at hand, from an Intel perspective, it's the messaging that's coming out of the United States, the Five Eye partners, the United States, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and New Zealand, specifically around figure out how to fight through and isolate from your control system environment. Essentially, it's giving up the walls and just saying you need to figure out how you're going to isolate internally and be able to continue to be resilient and maintain function or continued function versus trying to build a stronger defense.
Yeah, so maybe Frank, let's keep going down that thread, right, from that threat intelligence or threat perspective, risk perspective, right? Are you seeing, from your view of the E-ISAC side, are you seeing members position themselves a little bit differently? Are they talking about threats, anomalous behavior? And I know the big one, or the last big one that we heard, probably relevant to you all, there's Volt Typhoon. There's also Salt Typhoon, probably less applicable in this room, but still relevant. Are you seeing a positioning of the members now? Are you getting feedback from them that they're taking proactive steps on this? Or what are you seeing from your side of the group?
Yeah, so I'll talk a few anecdotes here from a E-ISAC perspective. So number one, in the CRIS program, if you're a CRIS member, some of you are, we were identifying, we did not call it Volt Typhoon at that time, but we were saying Chinese attributable nation state cyber activity. And we were reporting on it in, it was the October of 2022, I think, or when Volt Typhoon was released in 2024. So it was October of 2023. And then we had another report go out in March of 2024. So we were ahead of the curve, at least, in getting information indicators, and as well as TTP, in this case, living off the land, and the utilization of IP space in the geographic vicinity of your company. So that kind of has spurred things on. Additionally, Salt Typhoon is a very good one to reference, because not many, but several of our members from an E-ISAC writ large, several of them, especially on the co-op side, have their own broadband. So they are the internet service provider for their area, as well as the electric power, and they may also be water if they're a co or a muni. So it's that combination, and from a threat actor perspective, that's a great place to hold at risk. If you can get on the telecommunications side of it, you could also influence or impact the energy, the water, et cetera. From what are we doing about it? Absolutely, 100%. The industry is shifting. It's shifting. It's a sea change. It's difficult, but they're doing it. We as E-ISAC were challenged or tasked by the Electricity Sector Coordinating Council to generate essentially a preparedness guide regarding Straits of Taiwan type scenario, and what we need to get, or what you as a industry individual need to do or should be cognizant of in preparation before such an event, and then during that event. So there's an escalation ladder included. We also generated a more holistic or fulsome escalation ladder. And so the original one was only 4. The one we generated was 6. And it basically supports what we generated for the ESCC. Every E-ISAC member received that. The final thing here I'd point out is, the explosion and the exploitation of edge. So it could be, I don't care if it's your firewalls and I don't care about your vendor. It's all edge, and it could be VPNs, firewalls, servers, routers, whatever. So what we've done, we have a program now called Visor, where if you share IP space with us and it's free, we can go scan and look, and whenever 0 days come out or new CVSs come out, we can tell you right away, hey, we see this, we see that, we see this. Holistically, it's a huge change. I think one more I want to point out, I beg your pardon, is insider threat, insider risk. A lot of companies, especially on the CRIS side, did not have very fulsome insider threat programs over the last 3 years, especially, or 4 years even, especially starting with the North Korean cyber threat or cyber actors that work, remote IT workers. A lot of companies have instituted insider threat programs, and the things they're finding now are disturbing. I'm sitting here and I counted the room, and I'm like, I wonder if one of you is PRC or knowingly or willingly or unwillingly is a PRC. Like, you may not know the person you're talking to is PRC, and you're sharing things with them, and that's going back. So.
No, that's helpful. And Brian, I think from your view, right, as you and I have been engaged for a while, and the entire Imperium group, we're starting to see from the policy side, from the Hill side, that they're, our state senators and others are starting to become more accustomed and understand some of these words that Frank is using, right? Adversaries, PRC, what does that mean? Where is it at? What are you seeing? I know we had the national cyber strategy come out. We've seen a number of different policies, but from your perspective, where's kind of the Hill gaining momentum? And are you seeing things getting easier, harder? Kind of how's policy looking from a more forward-looking and forward-leaning perspective?
So it's a great question. And you really need to look at both what the executive branch is doing, what the White House and the agencies are doing, and what the legislature is doing, right? So you'll see from the national cyber strategy, just like the Biden strategy, protecting critical infrastructure was a key issue. It still is a key issue. They recognize that. So one of the sea changes that can be seen is this continual understanding of the threat that is growing. The understanding is growing as the threat is growing. So I think that is a key piece. As we start looking at how do we now address the issues, the Trump administration, Trump 47, is looking to reduce requirements or regulatory requirements, but shift that focus to really, rather than compliance issues and mandates, to focusing on actually doing the security. So how do you do that? How do you find that balance? And from the legislature's purpose, the legislature's role, they're looking now at where is that appropriate balance between having partnerships and between, the private sector that knows the critical infrastructure risks and how best to address them. How do we get everybody up to that threshold that they need to be at to ensure that we are addressing risk across the spectrum, we're addressing systemic risk, and we're addressing risk in scale. So there's a lot of challenges there. I think there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of thoughts going on the best way to do this. And I think we're going to see more and continuous on driving towards ensuring that we are appropriately addressing that risk, specifically the risk that OT is showing. So that is the other piece that I would say is when folks are talking about, cybersecurity, and there's always this thought of the IT fees. And it's very important that we understand the difference that OT is not just IT. It is something that's different. It's nuanced. Yes, I've had fights with people as we were writing policy about, well, OT just is included in the IT fees. No, you've got to separate this out because there are, the difference in the attributes and the functions of what the OT is doing is requires that special carve out or that special nuanced approach to addressing what PAC risk is. So hopefully negative, some were less.
No, that's great perspective, and I think you nailed it, right? It's this IT, OT, right? What is an operator actually doing? What is critical infrastructure actually doing? James, maybe pivoting to you on when you're out in the field or when you're talking to operators or engaging in a consultants, are you seeing that policy have impact yet, or are the operators feeling it yet, or you feel like it's more of a conversation at a high level, just waiting for essentially the shoe to drop?
It's a little bit of both, right? Because we still are trying to overcome that, the OT stuff inheriting the IT, especially cybersecurity, right? It is very different. It is specific. It is niche. And what we need and what we're starting to see ever so slowly are those OT teams, those OT groups are starting to have their own cybersecurity personnel, their own cybersecurity tools, and all that good stuff. Because that's really what we need, right? You can't necessarily take a high-level IT or cybersecurity policy and say, oh, well, it applies to everything. Right? That doesn't work. We've seen it time and time again. It just doesn't work. So that's what we're starting to see. And I think entities are starting to come on board with that.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's pivot off of kind of the threat side, because I want to go to something that's near and dear to my heart, and what we're hearing more on is CIP 15, right? Is anybody? Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
Before we switched off that, I know that I've worked at another company, Stanley Black & Decker, where we actually made a different distinction. We called it BT and OT because we found that communicating internally to a lot of the stakeholders, calling it IT and OT made it a lot more difficult for them to actually see the distinction. They thought this was just applying IT things down to an OT level. So we used the business technology term and then operational technology. It made it a lot easier for us to just take those stakeholders who didn't get it at the director level and explain to them by using that terminology. I don't know if that would be something that other companies should be adopting or looking towards, but I have seen that same exact problem though, where companies just don't see IT as different from OT, and it's because they're not creating the distinction. They're just applying it downward.
Yeah, and we worked hard in developing, as we were laying out policy on several different documents, to include the cybersecurity strategy, both in Biden and in Trump, in being very specific about OT. And I will tell you, there was a fight with other folks who were like, oh, no, IT covers it all. No, it doesn't. So I think that recognition of the specific risk, when we talk cybersecurity or critical infrastructure, the main issue is the OT. I mean, IT goes across all businesses. We get it. It's where your business processes are, but the issue is the specific functionality of operational technology, which is what you all are doing, is absolutely, specific and critical and cannot just be lumped together with basic IT cybersecurity.
Yep. No, I think that's something that we all have to deal with every day. I think this entire group, and even us internally at our own organization, right? The IT versus the OT, what is that? Where's the line? How is it defined? I think we could do a whole panel on that by itself. But staying on to kind of what we were talking about, right? I think, actually this next topic might even trickle into that just a hair, is CIP 15. And it'd be interesting, James, just maybe coming to you first, right? As you've kind of come from that auditing background, what are you seeing that's kind of changing in the mindset or how organizations are working towards CIP 15 versus kind of some of the legacy CIP attributes that we've been going after?
Yeah, so CIP 15 is continuing that trend of risk management, right? We look at CIP 13, for example, it's, supply chain risk management, right there in the title of it. We see that with CIP 14, now with CIP 15. So it does require a mindset change. So I'm going to throw out the term that everyone loves, and that's baselines, right? Because we all know what a CIP 10 baseline is, right? It's these 5 elements. This is what it is. There's not a lot of room for interpretation. Now we get to CIP 15, and they're throwing around the term baseline. What does a network baseline look like, right? And here is where the mindset change needs to happen, is it's very specific to an entity, right? Evergy's network OT baseline might look different from like Tri-State or Excel or whoever, right? So it's on the entity to determine what's important, right? What are those risk elements to them, and then document it. So that's where the mindset changes, right? From your strict checklist compliance with CIP 10 a more mature risk management program.
Are there members of the audience that are focused or have scope of CIP 15 today? Is there anybody here that be willing to raise their hand and talk a little bit about it, what they're doing, or what the company is talking about? Yeah, go ahead, Kenny. Oh, either one. Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk. I mean, we've actively deployed Nozomi across about 5 to 6 of our generation plants, our EMS, and we're working on the tuning of the rules. And then the other thing we're doing is we have a SOC that currently monitors corporate, and we're now having that monitor this as well. So we're to train those IT people to understand kind of those OT environments and, you know, what would a finding look like and who do they contact and stuff like that. So.
Do you see the IT team kind of driving that project, excuse me, or is that more on the OT side for the CIP 15, or is it hand in hand?
I'm currently in IT, but I'm an OT person, so we moved a portion of our OT group into IT, and all the fun that, you know, it's funny, I'm typing away at some of the comments to our leadership group right now. I appreciated some of the comments up on the thing. I'm like, you guys need to hear this. It's a joint ownership, and I would tell you it's very different. IT would not have used Nozomi. They would have used a product called Darktrace, and so there's definitely fights about that. And our plan is to have industrial defender feed SOC as well. So all that key baseline information ID does way better than Nozomi does. So I think it's got to be a partnership between those products. It can't be one or the other. We need to figure out how to have them combined to make it work the best. So.
Well, we do have a great Nozomi integration, just to throw that out there. Or Dragos, you know, and ID. You're going to hear us talk about CIP 15 later on how we are pursuing it. I'm not gonna start selling right now. I'll stop. But did you want to make a comment back there? Or?
It's similar. I mean, we're pretty much like fully deployed in a Dragos and ID environment to kind of, you know, essentially prepare ourselves for when the CIP 15, if it ever does come soon enough.
Or gets defined clearly.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing we've been fighting is the true definition of what they're looking for when it comes to internal network security monitoring. I mean, Dragos does a really good job at baselining your network traffic and, you know, what's talking to what. The real question I think that we have is, or, you know, I guess problem we have is leveraging, like, okay, should that actually be talking to that device and why? So establishing those kind of baselines or guidelines when it comes to like the packet traveling from one device, right? Like whether it's a digi to a relay or vice versa, whatever it may be. I think that's our biggest problem with CIP 15 is like fighting those. There's so much great data, but it's hard to actually like narrow down to like what you need to leverage for things like CIP 15.
Yeah, especially when it's unclear at this point with a lot of things still open. And
it's good to use ID actually. We leverage ID in a good way to backfill Dragos, essentially with like, all right, you have a device talking to another device, but like I want to know the make, model, and firmware of that device on the other end, and ID is actually great for that to essentially backfill Dragos with what those devices are.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that feedback from both of you. Well, you know, staying on the best practice, on the practices and standards, you know, Frank, I know E-ISAC has their OT mitigations program. You want to talk a little bit about that and what you guys are doing?
Sure. So this year we kicked off what we call the OT mitigation and recommendation pilot. We're essentially over the next 2 years, we're going to conduct a site assessment of a specific site. And by that, I mean not the entire utility footprint, but a utility that then says this piece of infrastructure or this location is of the utmost importance. So it could be a substation, a generation site, it could be whatever. The objective here then is to go out. We have a questionnaire. We walk the line, physically visit the site, talk to the engineers, talk to the IT, OT folks, ask questions, gather information, and then provide back recommendations based off the assessment. So we're taking this from a adversary perspective. So that's what I would argue is the uniqueness of this. So what I'm trying to say is, so you talked about, hey, baseline, right? That's great. What if your adversary is already there? Now they're already part of the baseline. So then it's basically, okay, let's assume adversary's already on network. What steps could you take today to either not necessarily mitigate, but increase the cost on that adversary? And then we come up with recommendations based around starting from that premise. And it basically, we look at your logical layout, your physical layout, based on, information systems you use, hardware, software, et cetera, to come up with those recommendations. 10 sites, two munis, two municipal, like public power, 2 co-ops, 4 CRIS members, and then 2 sites in Canada, because E-ISAC's North America.
No, that's great. And maybe just stepping up a layer higher, Brian, on the OECD stuff, right? You helped participate in that regulatory harmonization initiative. Could you maybe give a little bit of background on what that is and kind of what you all were looking to get out of that?
So, we've been hearing, everybody's been talking about, hey, look, the issue of regulatory burden has been a detractor from actual security in many respects. So while I was at the White House, we had been looking at this. We've been had a long discussion about regulation in general. What are the issues of regulation? And one of the key pieces that we talked about were the 5 principles about regulation. Number 1, it should only be done where it's absolutely needed. Number 2, it should be risk informed. Number 3, it should be performance or outcome based. Number 5, it needs to be harmonized. And when we talk about harmonization, we're really trying to get to reciprocity, and I'll come back to that. And then the last piece is it needs to be developed in consultation with the stakeholders. So those are like the 5 principles that we started looking at. We recognize, everyone recognizes that, these varying regulations, and ONCD did a request for information in 2023, got a lot of great input back, and there was conflicting regulations. There was multiple duplicative regulations, and what we tried to do was to look at how can we try and level set some of these things. So there was actually, and by the way, it was in both the Trump, it was in the Biden 46 National Cyber Strategy. It's also in the Trump 47 strategy. So it is a key thing. Now the administration is now talking regulatory efficiency, okay? And what they want to do is say, well, how to eliminate certain regulations. And there's been discussion about the SEC's regulation that the regulatory requirements are talking about eliminating. But the challenge becomes, number 1, you've got a bunch of different entities that all have individual and independent authorities. So I participated in this group called the Forum, the Cyber Forum of Independent and Executive Branch Regulators, which is like 30 different organizations. And we had this long discussion about how can we baseline what are common elements of regulatory requirements. And a long conversation, 30 plus different agencies, and everybody's going, yeah, that sounds really great. We're going to go ahead and we'll look at that. And we used both the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, the CISA CPGs, and we tried to lay out across all of these, what are the common elements that are really, they're common to every single sector and every single enterprise. We tried to lay all those out, and we had good agreement on this. It was pretty great. Until you get to the point where, okay, now we want to have reciprocity. We want to be able to say for FERC and for TSA, it's all going to be, we're going to go ahead and accept that if you satisfy the requirements for one regulation, it satisfies for another. So there was we had this long discussion. There was agreement in concept, but not agreement in practice. So where are we today? Well, today there's been a proposal. It's been on the Hill for the Federal Cybersecurity Regulatory Harmonization Act, I think is what it's called. And what it was going to do, or what it's proposed to do, is to put the Office of the National Cyber Director in a position to be able to compel all of those regulatory agencies to get together. Because previously that forum that I mentioned was the coalition of the willing. It was just people, the agencies all showed up, but there was no one to compel them to do that. What is going to be needed, though, is someone's going to have to, and I think it's going to have to be a legislative mandate to compel agencies to do this synchronization, to do this reciprocity. So we're going to need to get to that. The challenge is it can't just be policy people doing it, and that's who is largely doing it. We need the input from the engineers, we need the input from industry, and they're going to have to help build it. Because I'm a policy guy, and yeah, I got a basic understanding, but I'm not an engineer. You all that are working on these things that are no kidding, directly involved in how all of this works, we're going to need, the government is going to need, the nation is going to need participation from you to make that all happen. So that's kind of where I see both the legislative and the executive piece of this coming. It's a work in progress. It is an administration priority. It is specifically called out as pillar number 5 or 6 in the current national cyber strategy. And again, it's just regulatory efficiency. And I think it's a great effort. I think the proof will be in the pudding, and how do you actually get it done? So.
No, and I want to double down on that, because the harmonization is real, and kind of going off script here a hair, but we have, if you're not familiar, we have a monthly user group that we use for all of you to attend, to talk to your peers. It's technically owned by ID, but Chris runs it, right? So it's for you all to talk. And one of the things that with Imperium and Brian's group that we're looking at doing is, how do we get that input from you all to the right people on the Hill, right? There's, 20, 30 different companies in this room, and we have, triple digits organizations that are leveraging Industrial Defender today. But one of the asks I have of you all, right, is as some of this policy, as some of this starts coming out, we'd love to start getting direct. And I know the Hill and Jordan and Brian and everyone would love to get feedback direct from you all on what's going on, whether it is CIP 15, whether it is the harmonization, whether it is whatever other policy around critical infrastructure, because, you all are running it. I know we were talking about it with Kent, right? It's not necessarily a thankless job, but not a whole lot of people know what you're doing, right? But this is a great opportunity for Industrial Defender to try to give you all face time with the senators, with the legislation, what's going on the Hill, and start getting that feedback in there. So going a little bit off topic, but that's something that as we go into these user groups that we're going to start engaging and starting to come to you all for. Anything or any comments anyone wants to make on CIP 15 or regulation or regulatory bodies that they want to talk through from the audience before I switch to a can of worms on our last topic, because I'll give it 2 seconds. Nope. Okay, great. So let's talk about AI and OT, right? I know I see marketing fluff all day long, every single day. And please, audience, start thinking about your response, because I'd love to hear from you all. But, James, maybe starting with you, right? Aside from that said marketing fluff, right? Where are you seeing AI today being useful, or where could it be used usefully in an OT space?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the compliance and auditing piece, because that's my jam. So from a compliance standpoint, AI could be a really, really great tool for helping define frameworks and, where in your documentation you have gaps and identifying those gaps. From a consultant perspective, that's probably not the best thing to say, right? Because I might be putting myself out of a job. But, with the right safeguards around AI and how you use AI, it could be a very, very powerful tool in that regard.
So the thing that I think we need to recognize about AI, there's 2 or 3 things. Number one, it's a game changer. It's here to stay. It's going to change our lives. I think the most important revelation, which the administration wasn't even really talking about 8 months ago, 9 months ago, was Mythos and what the vulnerabilities now that are being drawn out. And you've probably all seen in the news, within the first year of Mythos existing, it found 10,000 zero-day vulnerabilities. So, think about that. So that the challenge is going to be, and you all are probably tracking what happened with the AI executive order that was supposed to come out 2 weeks ago that then got shelved at the last second, because there's a disconnect between what this issue of security versus, innovation, right? The concern that I have is that Mythos the Chinese are developing DeepSeek, and they're going to have their own virtual Mythos. So, the fact that we're trying to restrict it in the US a little bit, or concerned with restricting it, we're not restricting it there. So when we talk about AI, and I think the point that was just made is really important, that it can help, understand vulnerabilities and detect vulnerabilities. We're going to have, this issue of Mythos and other frontier models that are going to find things. The issue is going to be how quick are we going to be able to hit that to the OT defenders so that they can address those risks. And I think that's one of the big challenges with AI is, the threat landscape is now changing. The value on how you can also use AI to mitigate the threat landscape, it's two sides of the same coin. But this is going to be a continual effort, and again, that's the whole issue with cybersecurity, right? It's not like physical security where you can lock the door and you're good. This is going to be one of those evolving things we're going to need to continue to focus on and to continue to evolve and to continue to address how we're going to meet those challenges.
Cybersecurity in general has been a cat and mouse game, and this is just another cat and mouse game. From a offensive capability, like excuse me, Brian said with Mythos, 10,000 vulnerabilities discovered is so quickly. I mean, you're talking. One of the interviews that I heard, we had Microsoft come and talk to E-ISAC members, and they said something like, one engineer would normally take 2 weeks to discover the one vulnerability that Mythos found in a few hours. So, I mean, you're talking the short amount of time now necessary to discover new 0 days, and then the application of those 0 days is near instantaneous potentially. My point here, though, is from a defensive perspective, specifically thinking network analysis, network traffic analysis. What we've been doing, we're actually doing a project. We as E-ISAC with the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, Canadian Gas Association, and the IESO in Canada. They have programs, sister programs to CRISP. There it's called Lighthouse and Blue Flame. And so we're actually doing a project this week at Geek Week at CCCS up in Ottawa with a OT LLM, and essentially build out an LLM, nothing fancy, nothing, I think it has Llama or Claude on it. And then we're just feeding it OT data to see what we can see if it detects from an anomaly perspective. So it just baby steps down that path of trying to see what we can use it for to help inform from an OT perspective, especially with anomaly detection. Another thing I'd bring up too is the something that it's a, how should I put this? Here's a use case and then its application to OT. So I just watched a very interesting podcast, listened to a podcast a few days ago regarding the application of AI with regards to jet engines and how AI is finding new and better ways to build engines, design them, and as well as inform the build that humans could not do. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's introducing efficiencies and more power for the engines. Now take that from an electric power perspective, and what you're going to see from an OT perspective, I would argue, is the introduction of new AI generated technology for whether it's combustion engines like natural gas turbines to generate power or something like that. So you're going to get it not just from a cyber perspective, but also from a practical physical implementation perspective as AI is used to make more efficient, better tools, capabilities, power gen capabilities. So it's a twofold, but I also agree it's two sides of the same coin between offense and defense. Thank you.
No, that's good stuff, right? So we've got the, better threat detection, faster threat detection, the vulnerabilities, the analytics around that, and then ultimately being more efficient in our compliance reporting and what we're doing there. I would love to hear from the audience one of two things, right? One, how is your organization or in your position or your role, right? Because you have many peers in the room. How are you potentially using or leveraging AI today from your capacity or your scope? Or maybe even where you think AI could be enhancing kind of some of the practices or your scope that you're doing today. Is there anyone that wants to talk about what they're doing or what they feel like they could be doing with AI? Besides updating your emails? Okay. Yeah, go ahead in the back.
We were actually like pretty close to deploying some sort of an LLM to essentially like automate like a lot of our processes from inside OT out, whether that's like file transfers, reporting, weather data, whatever it may be. And I don't know if most of you probably heard about the recent water utility in Mexico that was compromised by AI. Essentially, the threat actors dropped Claude code into their corporate environment and conducted reconnaissance in a way that you've never seen before. Probably it actually identified like a single vNode server that gave access to the water utilities OT network. And that kind of scared us a little bit, depending on how you leverage it. And so I think I read about it as Dragos had done like a very extensive review of the Claude Code's methods of compromise, and essentially it sat there and just learned about their network for quite some time, and then ended up finding a single password authentication method and just password sprayed the crap out of it. So I think those things are scary. We're trying to leverage it in a way that limits capabilities like that, because essentially once you drop it, it's going to learn about your environment, it's going to learn about anomalies. And to your guys' point, I think the biggest threat is what you feed it, right? Like, what are you going to tell it to do, and how do you limit what it can do? Because obviously it thinks in its own way, it reasons in its own way. So we're still fighting that, but we had to put a little bit on halt after that water utility, dropped that Claude code.
Based on that last comment, I would say we're only interested in doing AI in our OT environment in partnership with our vendors. We have no interest in doing anything on our own. So because I don't know that we know it well enough to do it. And it's not the right place to play. And so what we are doing is we partner with Emerson on 2 pilots that we're working on, kind of 3 pilots, but 2 I'll talk about. One's a control loop pilot. It goes in and looks at all the control loops, compares them to an optimal control, and then it tells you which control loops on your power plant are most optimal from a tuning perspective, and then recommends specific tuning parameters. Human in the loop, you'll have to look at those and then say, yes, I'm going to institute them or not. So tuning parameters to improve overall plant control, which will save power, make our plants more efficient, make them more reliable. So that's number 1. And then number 2, we're doing an alarm management pilot, where it goes in, looks at all your alarms that are chattering, looks at them and tells you, maybe you need to increase the deadband, maybe you need to put this, in where, if the pump's not running, don't have those alarms on, things like that. So basically just trying to improve operational efficiency right now. We haven't done anything on the cybersecurity side, but we're definitely looking for partners to do that with. That's what we're doing right now.
That's great. Yeah, that's great feedback. I think we're all still kind of learning on how we can use it and where we can leverage it. But I am getting close to time, so I'm gonna skip a couple questions and maybe jump to the audience. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask the panel or get feedback from the panel? Chris, are you raising your hand?
I'll do one maybe more for Frank, but everyone can answer if they like. There's the recent announcement on the alignment of critical infrastructure, and looking for your comments on whether you think that's going to be complementary to what the E-ISACs are doing, or whether that's going to be detracting because it's an overlap, and how the reduction in federal funding has kind of precipitated that need for the Alliance for Critical Infrastructure.
So let me jump in real quick. So what I will say is the reduction of federal funding, especially with regards to CISA and FBI, have created FBI cyber have created a massive gap from an industry perspective. So E-ISAC especially has been called upon more by not just our membership, but also trade organizations, energy, electricity trade organizations, to do more. Because of that gap that's been created, especially with the municipals and or the co-ops and munis.
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with ACI. I've been involved with some of their workshops and a couple of other events. They're having their big event today as they're really launching officially. The issue with ACI is the Alliance for Critical Infrastructure is really looking cross-sector risk. And so, I think everybody here knows the interdependencies. We didn't get into it too much here, but, the interdependencies between finance and energy and water and comms especially. how all these things work together. So, ETAC, for example, the ISACs are pretty much usually sector specific, and they're looking at that sectoral risk, where ACI and other things that are like that are looking at the interdependency risks and the systemic risk across those. So that's where I think that's going to come in. To Train's point, to your point earlier of CISA and the reduction in funding, I firmly believe that there is a actual call to action and a need for private sector leadership, period. The government is looking to, reduce its footprint some. There is a need for the private sector to stand up and lead. And I think that is in part what ACI is trying to do, is what, other entities, the ISACs, there's 30 or so different ISACs. And the private sector entities, there is a need for the private sector to do the lead. At Calvary, everyone thinks, the government's going to come rescue everyone. There's not enough government people to do that. There's not enough government expertise to do that. That needs to be, again, it's got to be done in partnership with the private sector. But my thoughts are the private sector needs to stand up and lead on these things.
Yeah, and I just want to follow on that. At least for those of you here that are electric power, which I don't know if all of you are, or some of you are gas or something else, but at least on the electric power side, we have our ducks in a row, and we've had we collectively through the Electricity Sector Coordinating Council, the E-ISAC, and other bodies have really pushed security from have really pushed security, and CEOs have taken that seriously, and even the smallest companies, 2 people, maybe at a co-op out in the middle of nowhere, they still take this very seriously, which is great. After you get out of electricity and finance, it kind of falls off very quickly. One anecdote is that when Volt Typhoon occurred against telecommunications, they were shocked. They never thought they would be the target. Why would anyone target our infrastructure? We are the backbone that helps you get to places. Why would you compromise us? And so it caught them at unawares, which is maybe one of the reasons why their comms ISAC lost funding from CISA. So I bring this up just to say, from an energy perspective or electricity perspective, we've been doing a great job collectively as a whole. And I think that this also bodes well for the new organization, because electricity is in a position to help lead the way with working with a cross sector.
Any other questions? One more? Okay, we'll do one more.
So about the, expecting or wanting the private sector to start taking more responsibility. Has anyone been following what's going on with Nightmare Eclipse and Microsoft? They've been releasing CVEs because Microsoft has started to develop a reputation of not paying out on their bounties. And if there's any other companies that are kind of behaving similarly that you've seen, they might be, maybe there could be some strong arming that we could try to do to try to get them to start actually paying out on the CVEs that are discovered. So that way people aren't just going to drop them on day one and give us a 0-day attack. If you guys have seen Yellow Key, Undefend, Red Sun, these were all just dropped in the past week by one person who's just either might be a Microsoft insider with some insider knowledge, we're not sure, but they also could just be doing the AI investigation where AI seems to be really great at not finding novel CVEs, but maybe stacking 2 smaller CVEs together to create something that's a little bit more dangerous.
So here's what I can offer. What's the incentive and disincentive? So by that, I mean, what can you bring to bear against Microsoft? So Microsoft's a Herculean company, right? But I'll give you an anecdote from Japan. I was there a couple weeks ago. And so they have this program they call JC Star. And essentially it is a program that is self-regulatory. And by that, I mean the energy sector there specifically, and it's energy writ large, not just electricity. They will evaluate technology. And if any member of JC Star, by going through this evaluation project, you get a seal, right? Saying that you're JC Star approved. If you get through that process and you don't get that approval, essentially all of those organizations band together and say, I'm just not going to buy your stuff anymore. And that's to force the change. So that's the disincentive. It's a financial disincentive.
Yeah, I think those are all great insights and a lot that we're going to learn. And then if anybody else got the notification on their phone, Trump did just sign the AI executive order as of 5 minutes ago. So that'll be interesting to learn. We can talk about it at the baseball game over beers. So no, look, hey, James, Frank, Brian, I greatly appreciate your insights. It's been great listening to you all, seen through multiple lenses of kind of how you're approaching OT, AI, CIP 15, regulatory compliance. I hope it was beneficial to the audience as well. But if we can just give them a round of applause. Thank you guys for your time.